You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today, we're going to crack the lid on a storytelling situation. I get that request with a lot of my executive clients and business owners. They've read some articles, read some books, and maybe even seen some YouTube or TED Talk presentations about storytelling. And they feel it's a part that's missing from their leadership toolkit. So my guest today is someone who has made it a practice to help people in that area. His name is Tyler Foley. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I always like to start out by asking my guests to give us a little bit of a backstory. What's your journey been about, and why have you become inspired to do what you do with people?
Well, that's a great question, Doug. And to answer it, we have to go back to the beginning. But for me, the beginning is 6-year-old me and starting on stage professionally at 6 years old. So I was a child actor, got my first break working for a local theater company here. Professionally as a paid actor, as a unionized actor, and then moved on into film and television in my late teens, dabbled with some stunt work in my early 20s. And then, like most people who have had a career for 20 years, I retired at 25. And when I retired, the nice thing about being a child performer is the majority of your revenue that you earn, your paycheck, goes into trust. And so my mother, being a very, very smart and savvy woman when it comes to finances, particularly because she worked in an accounting firm for most of her life, and then in her twilight career became the payroll and benefits administrator for a private school here very close to where I live. And so she knew, the value of locking the money away and not allowing me to access it when I was 18 or 21, which were options, but making me wait till I was 25, which is probably the smartest thing that she could do, because when I was 25, I decided to go back to school, use that money for what it was originally intended for, and get an education and secondary education. So I got an engineering discipline, specialized in photogrammetry, which is a fancy way of saying I took pictures of the ground and then made maps out of them. So anybody who's ever turned on satellite view on Google Earth or Google Maps, I made those things. That's what I specialized in. And I created a mapping firm. And unfortunately, that business failed. We got about 3 years in, and we were actually kind of ahead of the curve. I had moved into interior mobile mapping. So we were scanning with 3D lasers, the interior of structures, and like putting photo accurate depictions up on, like we were taking photographs and laying those on and geoplacing it. And it was really cool stuff. But I was also doing this in 2010, 2011, before people were really taking advantage of that technology. Now you go to your realtor and they're like, hey, do you want to do a virtual walkthrough of your house? And somebody has scanned that thing and you can do it. I was doing that, but I was doing it about 8 years ahead of the curve. So that business unfortunately collapsed. But the primary consumer of geographic information is either the government or oil and gas companies. And when you work for any of those, you need to build a safety system. And so I had this other training that went along with it. So now I've been Tyler, the performer and the actor. Now I'm Tyler Foley, the entrepreneur and mapper. And then I have this little safety component. And a friend of mine said, you have the right personality and the right knowledge and understanding to be a really good safety professional. If I need a safety manager right now, if I paid to upgrade your skill set, because you've already taken these courses, you had to build your program. If you take these other ones and I pay for it, would you be interested in becoming my safety manager for a year? And I went, sure. He had this big project up in oil and gas. I was familiar with the site and the company from my mapping. And so I said, sure, let's do this thing. And from that evolved this really interesting career that I've built now, where I had started as a safety consultant, analyzing people's programs. And then I had this training component. And my most popular training program was what I originally titled Basic Instructional Technique. And Basic Instructional Technique was to teach people how to speak in public, how to find their stories, how to engage their audience. But it was originally designed specifically for construction supervisors and middle management. And then what was interesting is everybody started going back and telling their bosses, "Oh, this is such an amazing program. You have no idea. I've been terrified to speak for years and it's held me back. And now we've taken this thing and now I don't mind it." And I got so much positive feedback that I started to get a couple of executives who would come and say, "Hey, would you, can we take this?" Absolutely. Does it have to have the safety spin? No, because public speaking is public speaking. And next thing I knew, Basic Instructional Technique transferred into The Power to Speak Naked, which became the #1 best-selling book, which has really propelled me forward. So to answer the last part of that question, why do I do it? It is because I see the transformation every day. I have the joy and the privilege. I'll be teaching this workshop tomorrow morning to an association. They sought me out, brought me in, and they deliver very technical presentations. And they're like, they're always so dry and boring. How do we make them better? I'm like, by telling your story. How does this relate to you? So seeing that click and that understanding, particularly when I'm doing it with the safety professionals, because that actually has the ability to save lives. If they're able to translate this information in a powerful and understanding way, people then retain it better and make better decisions when it comes to their own health and safety. And that ultimately can save a life. And that's why I keep doing this.
Yeah. Well, great story in and of itself. Ironically, here we're talking about storytelling, but that's quite a journey. And on one hand, I was thinking in my mind that your journey through all those different threads and areas, when you now stand back and look, there's actually a pretty interesting arc there that kind of connects all the dots, even though in the moment you probably never thought that any of that. How do you go from child acting to mapping,
Yeah. 6-year-old me looking forward would have never thought it. It seemed so circuitous to get to where I am now. But looking back, like you said, it's a straight line. There are mile markers everywhere that pointed to this is what I would be doing right now.
Yeah. And I just want to asterisk and bracket that as a message to the audience here. We're going to get back to the main theme of this show, but I think it's such a great teaching point there. If you're struggling with any kind of season of doubt in your life right now or with your business, take a minute and go down that path of your journey to what you've been able to experience and accomplish, and do your own work of kind of connecting the dots and see if there's not, in fact, a prevalent theme that could be a very good indicator of what an ultimate purpose is in what you're doing. And as those who have worked with me know, I'm keen on helping people reconnect or identify a purpose that they maybe never had, and thinking about why you do what you do. And back to the main question of the day here, storytelling is such a popular theme for emerging business leaders. They do feel, and maybe it's something as simple as, I don't like public speaking. I don't want to stand on the podium and have to do a town hall with my large team. But there's even more to it than that in my mind. So it's beyond just being able to take the stage. It's owning the stage and having something of substance to share.
Yes. Well, and it's interesting because we will be discussing storytelling, and what you just described is one of the fastest ways to discover your story, is looking back and analyzing, how did I get here? What were those, pushes, where the universe kind of guided me? Tony Robbins says it better than anybody else. Life happens for you, not to you. And I think when we can adopt that mindset and really understand that, when we are in our periods of doubt, or when we are in feeling turmoil within our lives, that something pushed and guided you. Right down to the fact that I even got to be on stage at 6 years old was a result of my father passing away that year and my mother looking for an outlet for me, because at 6, I was having a hard time processing the finality of death, or even what that means. I would challenge any 6-year-old to have a full concept of the finality of mortality. And so I had done a couple of plays, school plays. So I was in the Christmas Nativity, and then we did an Easter play. And my teacher, Mrs. Nielsen, encouraged my mom. She said, listen, if there are opportunities for Tyler to explore this, I think this would be a good outlet for him. And then literally weeks after having that conversation with my mom, my uncle, who worked for the city of city of Calgary in their mapping department of all things, hey, runs in my family. He is a perennial bachelor, and his idea of cooking is picking up the phone and dialing his favorite restaurant kind of deal. And so he would always dine out, and he was across the street from City Hall, and that's where our main arts complex is. And he was grabbing his lunch and overheard the casting director for the main theater company there complaining about how hard is it to find a Tiny Tim. How hard is it to find a little boy who can say 4 words was kind of her deal. And he's like, well, how small does this person need to be? Because I have a 6-year-old nephew who you would very easily could do that. And she said, great, here's the number, because we're struggling. And so he passed that along to my mom, and my mom went, oh, great. So it got me out of the house. It got me exploring. It was one of the best gifts that I ever received. But that was literally a direct result of my father passing away in a single motor vehicle accident. So all those things connect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and having the good fortune of the uncle who was paying attention and had his ears opened and had obviously listened to what your mom shared.
Well, that was the interesting thing. He didn't know that she had heard that.
Oh, okay.
He had overheard them and just saying, well, I know a small boy, and passing that along to my mom, who went, Judy had just talked to me about finding these opportunities and not knowing how to do it. Like, mom had no idea where she would go to explore this. My uncle had no idea that she'd had this conversation, and yet here they all happened within weeks of each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Tyler, you had a reference in your material that you shared with me. You've got a quick kind of exercise to kind of frame up the idea of, I guess, starting with a good story or crafting a good story. Tell me more about what that is.
So you had alluded to it before we'd even brought it up to discuss it, that, we need to look back on those mile markers within our life, because those are usually the structure of what has brought us to where we are. And in those, there are always lessons. So one of the things that I would love for you and our audience to do today is, if they have to, hit pause, but grab a pen and paper, and we're going to do a quick 2-minute exercise. And it's going to involve a little bit of math, but I promise you it's not hard math. So the first thing I want you to do, once you've gotten your pen and paper, because we do want to write some stuff down, I would love it if you could take your age, however old you are, and round to the nearest 5. And once you've done that, you have that number. I want you to take that number and divide by 5. And this will give us 5 even time periods in our life. So for me, if I was to do this, I'm 43, I'm about to be 44. So I would be rounding up to 45, dividing by 5, and it will give me 5 even time periods of 9 years each. Now, I know, Doug, that there are going to be some, particularly when you're entrepreneurial driven and you're an A-type, who are like, but that is not exact, Tyler. I wish to have exact numbers. And if you are one of those people, and I appreciate that because I am one of those people too, if you have had to round up, I want you to deduct whatever that number you rounded up by. It was either 1 or 2. It wasn't more than that. from your last time period. And if you had to round down, I want you to add that number. And again, it was either 1 or 2 to your first time period. And the reason for this is we probably don't remember a lot that happened in those first year to 2 years of our life. So those memories are going to be hazy. They may be significant, but will give us a little bit of buffer in that first year, if you need to be exact. And we know what's happened in the last epoch of our life. So that's probably the most fresh. So we don't need the full time period to explore that. So if you're an A type and you need to be exact with your numbers, add what you rounded to the beginning or deduct what you rounded from the end, depending on which way you had to go. So when I do this exercise, I get my perfect time periods. And so from 0 to 9, and then 10 to 18, and then 19 to 27, etc. Whatever your number is, whatever you've gotten to, I want you to look at those time periods. And I want you to ask this question. When you look at your first time period, for me, 0 to 9, what is the most significant memory that comes to your mind? Like, what's the first one? When you think of you in that time period, what is the first one that springs to mind? Not the second, third, or fourth, the first one. And I want you to write that down. You only have 20 seconds for this. Do not dwell on this. It needs to be the instinctual thing that draws to you. When you think of you in your first time period, what is your most significant? What is your most prevalent memory? Write it down. And then do it for the second time period. Do it for the third, do it for the fourth, and do it for the fifth. Once that is done, then the real exploration comes. So for me, when I do this exercise, the first thing that I can think of is, and I have 2 very distinct memories. So if you have, don't be afraid to explore this, but I do want to focus on one first because the work goes hard. But I do have 2 very distinct ones. The first one is the sound of applause, the first time I ever got a standing ovation. So it's an auditory one that comes and I hear it and I can go right back to that moment. And then along with it comes a feeling of warmth that radiates from my chest, and it's pride and it's joy and it's elation, and all of that comes from my chest, and I can feel the sensation of it again. And this is a key thing for your audience to remember, that your memory doesn't have to be like this vivid, moving picture. It could be a sound, it could be a smell, it could be a color, it could be a feeling, it could be a vivid picture, or it could be a hazy remembrance, but it's the thing that comes to your mind first. So we write each one of those down. And for me, like I said, my first one is that sound of applause. And if I really want to get heavy, the next one that I have is literally 2 months to the day. And it's the sound that my mom made when a police officer and our family physician came to the back door to tell her that my father would never be coming home again. And she made this guttural, spine-tingling, universe collapsing sound. It was this wail that was just animalistic, and it haunts me to this day. And when I look back on both of those, and this is again where the exploration comes, we want to start asking why. Why are those memories significant? For me, my memories very intrinsically influenced every decision for the rest of my life that brought me to here right now. Because in one moment, I discovered a sound that and a feeling that I will chase for my entire life, trying to replicate, trying to feel again, because it's pure joy and pure elation. In the other, I have discovered a sound that I never want to hear again, and I have spent my life avoiding and pushing away. And there is no wonder that I have gotten into safety as a profession, because it allows me to speak publicly, receive that adulation, receive that joy of giving a presentation where I can receive applause and I can receive a standing ovation, which is the ultimate gift that any human can give another, by the way, in my opinion, to receive that that admiration from an audience is second to none. And then a sound that I have avoided and want to help others avoid for the rest of their lives. So that is the beginning of the exercise, Doug. I want your audience to take their age round to the nearest 5, divide by 5, look at those epochs in their life and ask themselves, what is the most significant memory? And then that homework, after they're done listening to our conversation today, is to go back and ask yourself, why is that significant? And once you're done exploring the why of it, what are the lessons that you learned? How are these things connected? Who were you prior to each memory? Who were you after each memory? What growth occurred in between each memory? What happened before? What happened after? What lessons can you draw from this? And how can you apply those to your life now? And that is where you start to form some very powerful stories that you can use in business, you can use in life, you can use, these are universal, you can use them anywhere.
I love that. I think that's a very tangible exercise, and it eliminates a lot of just the grayness of how some people tend to look at their life. As Mark Twain famously said, my life has been a series of tragedy, most of which never happened. Well, of course, he's speaking to the mental thing we do with our head, but you're talking about the actual experiential moments that might have had an impact. And I love your purposeful question of why. Why do you think that had an impact? What was it that had that register with you and the takeaway you got from it? And I also like the part about explore the learning. When that happened and you contrast the person you were before and the person you are after that moment, what was the learning from it? What did you take away? What did you value that you maybe have allowed to become part of the patchwork quilt that we all are?
Yeah. Well, and you can't come on a show called Leadership Powered by Common Sense and not give some common sense advice. And I think that's the important thing too, is that we oftentimes try to complicate things. And it can be very simplistic, particularly with this exercise and seeing and connecting those dots. Because I can tell you right now, I've done this exercise and I have to continually do this exercise for me. As I grow, I start to see more nuance in my life, right? It's like going back and revisiting an old film and then discovering a hidden element within it. You're like, oh, I didn't notice that in that scene before. And now all of a sudden it takes on new context and it takes on new meaning to you. So it's important to go back. But for me, like when I was on over 350 podcasts last year. I was on over 30 stages presenting, and it still always makes me smile when I'm waiting in the green room, whether virtual or live, when somebody reads my bio or introduces me, because I have led my life. So for me, it's just who I am. And I'm like, I don't think I have an exciting life until somebody goes, child performer, started on stage at 6 years old, suffered a medical incident that left the left side of his body paralyzed at 17, overcame that to, go on to do stunt work in film and television, was in Carrie, Door to Door, Ragtime, Freddy versus Jason, is now the #1 bestselling author of The Power to Speak Naked, proud father of a 7-year-old genius. Like all of these things make me go, I did that. But to me, they're just things that I did. They were just part of my life. That is just life. And I often equate it, and most people, I'll see if they can relate to this. If you're thinking to yourself right now, if you're the listener and you're like, yeah, but Tyler, you did some really cool things. I have not done those cool things. I wasn't in film and television. I wasn't on stage. I have never published a book. And by the way, that's an easy thing to do. You should. I'm going to encourage your audience right now. If it's in your head, publish a book. It's the best gift you can give yourself. But I equate it very much to being in a hot tub, right? When you first get into your hot tub and life is new, you're young, you're 5, 6, 7 years old, you get into that water and you're like, whoa, it's hot. Everything is sensory and it's exciting. But then as you sit in that tub, your body acclimatizes to it and you don't feel the warm water anymore. And it's not until you step outside of the tub that you go, oh, it is cold out here, and you hop back in the tub and you're like, oh, now I can feel the warmth. And that's kind of what this exercise does for you. It forces you to get out of the water for a moment and look back and do a little bit of a sensory shock. And then tying those things together, finding those common threads, that becomes the real joy with it, because then you can relate these stories outside. It's Les Brown says it better than anybody else. Never tell a story without a point, and never make a point without a story. So as you explore these stories, that's why I want you to discover those whys and figure out those lessons in there, because that's how you apply it when you start to tell it.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. The whole idea of evaluating the opportunities and experiences you had, it is a very common humanistic view to say, well, I look at my list here, I don't think it's all that special. But when you stack it up and allow it to be compared to others, it is special. It is going to be. And in some work I used to do in career coaching, one of the tools we used, we had people do a similar exercise. We didn't arithmetically divide it up, but we encouraged people to build a list of accomplishments along the way, things that they had an opportunity to do. Maybe it was a task, maybe it was a project, maybe it was a job, whatever. But build this list of accomplishments, and then more importantly, go back to the list and start sort of grading, put pluses and minuses. This accomplishment was really spectacular. I really felt fulfilled. I thought it was awesome. I wish I could do this all day long. That kind of grading idea. And then other things, they were accomplishments at the time, but you're going to look at yourself and say, it was nice. I'm glad I did it. It was a good experience, but I don't ever want to do that again. Like, to use your example, you don't ever want to hear a sound like your mom, screeched that day. But we all have those accomplishments too. But the interesting point is, and when I first started teaching this many, many years ago, Tiger Woods was at the peak of his golf career. He could do no wrong and, was winning everything. And I used to say, well, when Tiger hits a 340-yard drive, that to me would be an accomplishment just to hit it that far. I don't care where it landed, just to be able to hit it out there that far. I would count that as an accomplishment. I'll deal with the consequences later of where it landed. Him, if he missed his spot by a foot or two, he's not happy. And so it's it's that view of that accomplishment that we all hear. So if we could ask Tiger, what'd you think about that 340-foot drive? He wasn't happy that it was that long. He was upset that it might have missed the spot by a foot or two.
Yeah.
Me, on the other hand, Doug, what'd you think about hitting that 340-yard drive? It's, oh my God, personal best. I've never hit a ball that far. That's awesome. I'm so happy. Da da da.
Oh yeah, I regularly crush my driver 185.
I'm there with you, brother.
Yeah, my driver and my 3-iron are the exact same distance. The difference being the 3-iron is significantly more accurate. So
yeah, exactly. And but the point is, as we look at our ability to list accomplishments, we may be looking at them thinking they weren't all that special, but compared to anybody else's standard, they are. And you ought to take pride in them.
Well, and the other thing is too, is we've got to be careful of that hidden trap of comparison, right? I am by all measures and metrics, a very accomplished and good orator and public speaker. The danger comes when I start saying, well, yeah, but I'm not Les Brown, but I'm not Tony Robbins, but I'm not Brian Tracy, but I'm not. But none of them are me either. So recognizing where your strengths are and what you're doing to the best of your ability is very, very important. And again, too, like, I was a child actor, but I'm not Macaulay Culkin, and I'm certainly not, any of these other famous child actors that have grown up through the years and have all had their own different experiences too. And have experienced the industry in different ways. So what makes you unique, what makes your story unique, is that you we're the one to experience it. And that's why your story is such a powerful tool in your marketing, in your business, in your life in general, because no one else is the expert or authority on your life than you are. An autobiographer will always have a better view of the life than a biographer will. And I bet, like, even if you listen back to the episode you recorded with Pamela Wilson, when she was talking about marketing, some of what she alluded to was finding that personalizing that experience, what makes you stand apart. And that's where you highlight it. Like, what makes me a good safety professional, ironically, is my performance background, because most of what I learned from safety, I actually learned doing stunt work in film and television. And that sets me apart. Interestingly, for probably a good decade, I tried to hide that off of my resume. There was this big gap that was unexplained. And I tried, because all actors work side jobs. And I was lucky when I was performing that I didn't actually have to. Very few unionized actors earn a living wage over a year. And I did. I actually did a really good job. I was in demand, and I was working a lot in my early 20s. But I still had side gigs. So I would make those side gigs seem longer on my resume so that I didn't have to talk about my acting. And the more I tried to suppress it, I found the more clients I was losing. Or I remember once doing a large job, being contracted out to do this large audit. And the company that contracted me was very specific up front. They're like, do not talk about your acting. We don't want to know. We do not do it. It's unprofessional. You cannot mention it. And so I was like super tight-lipped. And a couple of the people found out. They looked me up. I don't know. I can't remember why they Googled. And they're like, you were an actor? And I was like, I'm not allowed to talk about it. They're like, why? I'm like, they don't want me to talk about it. They're like, but we want to know more. And it was in that moment that I decided, you know what? Why am I suppressing this? Everybody always wants to know, how are you able to give such good presentations? Everybody always wants to know why I have my view on safety that I do, why I process the way that I do. All of it's from my film and television. So the more I was hiding it, the more business I was losing. The instant I came out and said, former stunt professional, Hollywood stunt professional will come and analyze your safety system with the eye of a stuntman, my business exploded. And it was embracing that part of me that was so important. Do you want to have the best safety training that you've ever had? Most people think of safety training as a lobotomy. So let's have a trained actor come and deliver your next safety training or safety talk and keynote presentation. All of a sudden, the phone went off the hook. I have never been busier than when I embraced this part of me. And so for everybody, it's one of the things that I teach in all of my seminars. The thing you're afraid to say is what your audience likely needs to hear. And the more you can find that bravery within yourself to discuss those parts, that's when you start to find your real audience. That's when your business can take off. The marketing becomes so easy when all you're having to do is tell the truth.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to that. I alluded to the career coaching organization I created in 2008. And of course, that was right in the very middle of the big crash that had happened. But one element that was my personal story, because of the crash, I had to close a company and file a corporate bankruptcy. And that was the first time in my life I'd ever had to do something like that. There was a piece of me that was embarrassed by that, even though, nobody was surprised. My business that I had to close happened to be related to the mortgage finance world. And, that was the epicenter of the crash. And my company was collateral damage to the whole thing. We were a lesser player, but nonetheless, we were relying on that industry to do our work. And I had 200 national, 200 national clients. And in 45 days, I lost 75% of my business by those others going down and going under. And I I kind of carried that with me for a brief season, and then finally one day at one of our workshops in the career transition organization, we were doing some things, and I felt compelled that I can't hide behind this anymore. I know people are out here struggling financially because they lost jobs and their savings have run out and they don't know what they're going to do next. So I shared that I too had lost a whole company and, had to file that bankruptcy, and people were going, "What? Really? Oh my God." And then all of a sudden it was it was really a pivotal culture shift.
Yeah.
I wasn't just some pundit up there making them feel bad that they weren't all that. Now I was one of them in a big way.
Yeah. I always like to equate it to, and for some people you'll have to think back a ways, and I'm there with you. I appreciate that. But back in high school, when you were writing exams, and the teacher made a mistake, and so they'd given questions. It was multiple choice, and you had A, B, C, or D, and maybe it was a math question, right? 2 times 3 is 6. And the options that you had, A, B, C, and D, were 3, 4, 5, and 7. And everybody was doing 2 times 3 and going, I think it's 6. Am I missing something? Where it was this supposed to be a plus? What's going on? And everybody's quiet and nobody's doing anything until over in the corner, Doug raises his hand and goes, Mr. Foley, on question 17 here, 2 times 3, I keep doing it and I'm not getting the answer. Was this supposed to be 2 times 3 or was it 2 plus 3? Because I can do 2 plus 3. There's a 5 here, but I can't find the answer for 2 times 3. And then Mr. Foley looks down and he goes, oh, I'm sorry, class. I made a mistake. Yeah, no, for that one, either circle 5 or write in 6. Either way, I'll take it out. This exam will be out of 19 instead of 20. I made the mistake. It's a bonus one for anybody if you just want to circle this one. And then what happened after you said that, Doug? Everybody goes, oh yeah, I was struggling with that too. I didn't know. I thought I was going crazy. Oh, I'm so glad you said something. It's the person who speaks up first that's viewed as the leader. Right. And it's okay to say, I don't know, or I failed. I have no problem telling people that my mapping business failed. It failed for multiple reasons, some of them outside of my control, some of them within my control. Either way, it didn't work. But what I did from that is learn a whole bunch of lessons about getting the right director's insurance in place, doing a proper market analysis, making sure that your pricing is on point. And if your pricing can't support your business model, or the equipment that is needed for it, don't do that thing. And I learned a lot from it. And now I run a very successful company that is a parent company to 5 very successful entities. But I had to go through the failure to learn it. So there is nothing wrong. And when you speak up, when you say, this is who I was, when you can, and particularly when you can tie it back to your story, that's when you can start to really be that leader, whether you are officially titled a leader or not. Leadership doesn't come with a title. Leadership comes with an attitude.
Absolutely. Very well spoken, and very much something that I believe in and challenge all of my listeners and prospective clients to consider. That you're right. Leadership is not about the title, but it is about the opportunity and the difference you can make in a situation, whether it's at work, at home, in the community, wherever. And I'm tempted to step up on my soapbox that I do periodically on this show. And a simple statement: the world needs leaders. We're suffering a leadership crisis at many levels: government, state and local, and even in business and industry. And those who are willing to step up and be that guy to raise their hand and go, boss, sorry, but that just doesn't compute. And yes, you might get pushback from the boss, but hopefully those who know better will stand with you. And I know that's true in the safety realm. been exposed to a lot of that in the oil and gas industry that's so prevalent down here where I live. And safety and health and environmental are such big events, and they all kind of co-mesh and impact one another. So the training and the sensitivity to that is premium.
Yeah. Well, and that really was the nexus of the Power to Speak Naked when I started the program. And when it was originally titled Basic Instructional Technique, because I wanted people to be able to connect with their stories, because nothing impacts better than a story, right? And for me, it was important for people to find the courage to talk about that. Even for myself, like my father, his motor vehicle accident came as a direct result of poor journey management and fatigue management. It was a direct result of a work environment that he had created, ironically. My father was an entrepreneur. Originally, he was a teacher and an excellent and well-respected educator, but he took a sabbatical for a year to start a restaurant. And in starting that restaurant, he was working 18, 20, 24-hour days. And the commute at the time, the restaurant was in downtown Calgary. We lived in a rural farming community at the time, would have been an hour and a bit south. And, he fell asleep at the wheel and hit an old World War II munitions bunker, literally the only structure in a farmer's field for miles. And he managed to clock this thing square on in a 1983 Chrysler K car, and K car lost because that munitions bunker had a wall that was 4 feet tall and 3 feet thick of reinforced concrete. And, so these are those things that when I look back, I'm like, of course I got into safety, of course, because I can see those connections now with the lens that I have. And it's important to me that people understand that. So when I share those stories, this is what happened to me at a young age. My father passed away. When I was in my mid-20s, I witnessed a horrific, absolutely horrific industrial accident working for an airline. I watched a man liquefy himself through an airplane propeller. And when I tell that story, it's hard for me to tell. I still have PTSD from it. There are nights where I wake up in cold sweats because I can still picture this man's boot lying at the bottom, because that was all that was left of him, was a single steel-toe boot. The rest of them just went through and sprayed across the side fuselage of an aircraft. And that has impact. You can't tell those stories and not have impact. You can't bring that up and not have people go, I mean, you feel the air leave the room.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like, oh, snap. But it's important to me, because why do I do these things? Because I see the results when things aren't followed. So for me, structure is important. Training is important. This is an airline. They don't like having things go wrong. They are heavily regulated. What doesn't matter where in the world that you're finding your airline, but 6 weeks of training for this ramp staff that went in, and yet still new hire, right? So like all those things that we talk on safety, like the training, new hire, competency evaluations, checks, all of these things. It was a perfect storm that led to this unfortunate incident, and now a man is gone. So it's sharing these things. Why are they important to you? What were the details? When I share that story, I get into a lot more of the detail because I find it important. But it's connecting those. And again, back to what Les Brown said, never tell a story without a point, never make a point without a story. You need to be able to connect this to your audience. Why are you telling it? If there is no reason for telling it, then don't tell it. If there is a reason for telling it, they need to be able to connect the dots at the end, and it's your job to connect it for them.
I think that's a great word. And on that, Tyler, I think we need to wrap this up. As much as I'd like to carry it on, we might need to do a second episode here. But this is great stuff. And thank you for the work you've done and your effort to connect the dots to create that value out there in the world. But tell everybody the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more.
Well, the best way, Doug, is probably to check the show notes, and we'll have links in there. So my request, my humble request of your audience right now, Doug, if they are regularly listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, and if they are consuming this, right? Maybe they listen to what Joanna White had to say, and they're thinking to themselves, how do I overcome the could have been of tragedy? Or what does that mean for me? Could I tell that story better? Or, maybe they listen to one of your other episodes. Why are they coming back? That's my first question for your audience. What about Leadership Powered by Common Sense? And what about Doug are you enjoying? So as you scroll down to come and find my link in the show notes, you're going to see a little graphic that has 5 stars on it and a little box that says comments. They are not there for ornamentation. If you, as an audience member right now listening to this show, if you are a regular consumer of Leadership Powered by Common Sense, if you like what Doug's bringing, if you are enjoying the guests that come on, could you give him a 5-star review and write in the comment why? Don't skip the comment part. The comment part is important, and here's why. If you tell Doug the guests that you enjoy, he can go and book more of them. If he books more guests that you enjoy, you get more knowledge that you can use. Doug can build his platform larger because now he's serving an audience consistently the way that they want to be served, that being you. And it helps me because if Doug's show gets more popular, there's more views of the show that we just recorded, which means I get more exposure. So if you could do all of us a favor and leave Doug a 5-star review and be specific in the comments, why? What are you enjoying? What was your favorite episode? What was your favorite takeaway? What do you like about what Doug's doing? What would you like to see more of in the future? Be specific in that review because that will help him grow this platform, which helps everybody. It serves you by getting more content to you. It serves him by helping him grow a show, and it serves me by getting more eyeballs onto this episode. If you're willing to do that and give Doug a 5-star review and be specific in the comments, if you come to my website, which is SeanTylerFoley.com, and Sean is spelled the proper Irish way, SeanTylerFoley, and say Tyler sent you, right above the fold, the first thing you're going to see is an invitation to join my private Facebook group called Endless Stages. If you join through the website, as a gift to you, we will give you a free PDF download of my #1 best-selling book, The Power to Speak Naked. We'll give you access to my Drop the Mic Trainer series, which is 7 5-minute videos. So in a week, you can consume this material over a cup of coffee. So it's not a big investment, but they're very actionable steps, very similar to what we did at the beginning of this episode. They are all very quick, very actionable steps that will make you a more confident, more powerful, more believable speaker. So you get that for free. Plus, you get access to the Endless Stages community, where I go live every Tuesday at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern time, and give a 20-minute training presentation on whatever happens to be the hot topic of the week. And we pull that from the membership. So the more engaged our membership is, the more it's likely to serve you. All of those are my gift to you if you are willing to leave Doug a 5-star review. No 5-star review, no free gifts for you.
Well, that's great, Tyler. Thank you so much. I really, and you've taken a lot of my thunder here at the end, which I'm glad to give up and give to you. So we do appreciate those comments, and he said something very specifically that is very important to me. Your comments and your messaging back to us help us guide, build, and direct the future episodes of this show. So if there is a topic, a theme, or a particular guest you liked, if you watch an episode and you say, I really like to know more from that person, well, let me know, because I do have the good fortune of having great relationships with my guests, and I'm in constant contact with all of them. So we can always arrange that sort of thing, but it is a matter of knowing for sure what you're liking and what's working for you. Give us that feedback, give us that comment. And if you know someone, or you yourself might be a good guest volunteer, raise your hand, let me know. There's links on my website to fill in a short little survey form if you want to be a guest. I'll certainly entertain that. But anyway, thanks again, Tyler, for all your help and great message here. And hope to see you again real soon.
Thank you for having me, Doug.
And folks, with that, we are going to put a bow on this one, wrap it up, say goodbye, wish you the best. And one last little caveat, I want to remind everybody, if you're listening on audio, we do have a YouTube channel with the video version of this. Hop over there, same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Enjoy the videos, and you can leave your comments there as well. But again, for now, we're going to say goodbye. Take care. Thanks for spending some time with us.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.